Absolutely fantastic to have Gerald Coates with me here today. Gerald has been a national leader for many a decade and has been on a very, very strong prophetic leadership journey in his time. So, Gerald, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Gerald, I remember you from many decades ago. You had a great impact and influence on my own life with some of the prophetic things that you spoke over me, which was really good and really encouraging. So, thank you for that. And also, I'd like to ask you what influences have had a big impact on you regarding leadership? For example, books or mentors, or what's been the biggest impact on you developing and becoming a leader?
I suppose initially, if I look beyond when I was in the Anglican Church
Hmm.
and when I was at the Gospel Hall in Cobham, there were spiritual mothers and fathers there, but it was a language we never used then. We use it a lot now, but we didn't use that then. And they were in the main very fine people. But then I found myself one day riding on my bicycle and I began to sing in a language I'd never heard before. I was being baptized in the Spirit as I rode my bicycle. And then something similar happened to my wife, and then a guy, Roger, and two girls. And there was an elderly lady who lived nearby. In fact, she's in the burial ground just 200, 300 meters away from where I'm sitting now in the Anglican church. And she said, I've been praying for the nation and for this region for decades. She was a single lady, and she said, I believe you're the answer to my prayers. I had no idea what she was talking about because I had average education. I was recently married. We were looking after a few people in Cobham who were also baptized in the Spirit. But she was absolutely right. And she went on praying for me. And so we didn't use the word mentors then, but
Mhm.
she was a female mentor to me. Wasn't a close relationship, but it was a godly relationship. And then she introduced me to, I don't know how she knew these people, but she introduced me to a guy called Morris. And so he would come and speak in our home, sometimes just to 20, 30 people. And he would come quite regularly. And his main message was grace. And one of the first things he said was every letter that Paul wrote begins with the grace of God. And every letter he finished, it finishes with the grace of God. He had been killing and torturing Christians under law, but the grace of God hit him and changed his life. And then he had a friend, less colorful, less eloquent, but godly and wise, and his name was John. And to this day, John, who was in my home here just a few nights ago, has been a great source of wisdom to me. I'm sort of loud, I'm colourful, I'm fairly black and white. I don't mess around, but that has its downside as well. And so he comes in with wisdom. You could have said it differently, you could have done it differently. And he would be one of the major reasons I'm still around today, still effective. We're in lockdown, so there are no public meetings, but I've got a book out. I didn't write it, Ralph Turner wrote it. It's called Gerald Coates Pioneer. And the themes of leadership and the prophetic, there's a whole chapter on prophets and prophecy in there. That's still selling all over the UK. And so it's difficult to believe I'm still having an influence when, other than with my own people here, there's nothing to speak at. There are no conferences, no big events, no spring harvest, no green belt, nothing like that at all, no new wine, and so on. And so I think they've been the main influences. There's another influence which only older people would remember. And he was a brilliant international journalist called Malcolm Muggeridge. And he was on, when I was a boy, he was on TV every week. And he was an atheist. And if there was something going on in the church, they'd bring him on and he would annihilate them with colossal humor and ridicule them. And then he said to me, I don't know if I can remember the precise word, he said to me, I'd lived my life without God and I was in despair. And I thought, what man could I go to get me out of this? What help can I get? And he said, but other than Jesus, there was no other such man and there was no other such hope. And so almost against my will, I submitted the irresistible grace of God. And if you can find him on the net, Malcolm Muggeridge, there are loads of his talks. He's got this very affected voice, but he was stunning. And so they were, among others, of course, Morris, John, and Malcolm, major influences on how I saw Christ, how I found perhaps a little more humility, and it just helped me to be as effective as I've been.
Fabulous. Gerald, just pivoting here into how obviously you've been influenced, you've been mentored, you've been influenced by other people, but let's talk about how you've influenced people as well, because one of the things about leadership is it's the big I word, the big influence, how we influence people. And the key thing often that takes place is the art of the conversation, how we converse with people. So if you could maybe just share a little bit about how you've managed to position yourself in a conversation, have that conversation. Has it been prophetic, or has it been nothing said, nothing profound, then suddenly you just have a sense of, I need to say something to this person? How do you manage the art of the conversation to influence people?
Well, I think I'm mainly known for the prophetic, with mainly unknown people and quite a few very well-known people. And you can choose when you see someone to point out their deficiencies and their sins, or to encourage, exhort, and comfort.
Yeah.
1 Corinthians 14. And many, many times I've said to people, could you just come and sit down with me? And I could probably list, particularly at the moment, if they're single and fairly young, almost every guy has seen pornography and indulged in the behavior that goes with it. And for some, it's addictive. But pointing that out to someone won't get them out of it. And I would tend to sit them down and say, do you know who you are? And they would look at me a bit shocked. And I said, you're unbelievably important. Your life over a lifetime could affect hundreds, if not thousands of people. You may not understand how that would happen, but God's hand is on you, and he wants to take you out of where you've been and lead you into something much higher. And quite often, years later, somebody will sit me down and say, you may not remember coming to this meeting or this conference or this event, but this is what you said. And I was addicted to pornography, or addicted to looking at things I shouldn't be looking at, or addicted to alcohol and things like this. But they were clever enough to cover it all up. And when they then got words, do you know how important you are? Do you know how significant you could be? It took them out of that world and into another world.
Wow.
And so leadership is helping people, even though you may not ever see them again, getting out of where they've been, which a lot of folk don't want to be where they've been, but they don't know what to do. I mean, loads of guys have said to me, particularly in the last few years, I didn't know how to get out of what I was in. And there are certain subjects. I mean, pornography is an absolute classic. Virtually every guy in any church has seen pornography. It may not have been this week or this month, may not even be this year, but they've seen it. Nobody, absolutely nobody talks about it. And there's a guy called Samuel. If you go to Pioneer Engage Church, Leatherhead, you will eventually come to recordings. And there's a recording there of a guy called Samuel. And he came to a meeting I was leading. I wasn't even speaking at it. and but there were no chairs at all. He didn't know where to sit. So he'll come and sit with me. And he saw me open the meeting up, and we worshipped with Dave Bilborough. We listened to a speaker, Ian Andrews. He prayed for people, and then I closed the meeting down. And Samuel said to me when I sat down, "Who are you?" And I told him a bit about myself. And he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a speaker and a writer." And he said, "Oh, what was your last book?" I said, "Well, the last book is about me, written by Ralph Turner, called Gerald Coates Pioneer, which is a brilliant book. He's such a good writer. But the last book I wrote was called Sexual Healing, which is dealing with pornography, ungodly behavior, addictions, and so on." And that was it. And he said to me a few weeks later, came to see me, "What you didn't know is that at the age of 17, 18, I have been a porn addict for all of my adult life. Every day, every weekend, sometimes home alone, 7 times on a Saturday, and so on. And I was in despair. And I have prayed for 4 years for God to get me out of this, and nothing's happened. And then I met you. And so on my way home, with my parents driving the vehicle back into Sussex, I thought, has God put this man in my life to get me out of my prison? And we talked on the phone. We've only seen each other 2 or 3 times since then, but we talked on the phone. And again, that was leadership. It's not, you're not trying to be a leader. You're just saying that there is another place you could live. There is a better person you can be. And I've got an email from him right now. I could, go to it on the laptop here. And he said to me, "I've been completely porn free, never mind anything else, for well over a year. I've not failed or made a mistake once. I've got a healthy relationship with Christ. I'm being effective in my church. I can't believe that you and I have met." And I say we've only seen each other 2 or 3 times. Most of it's done on the phone, because people feel they can talk more easily when you're not in front of them and so on. So again, we're back to leadership, being encouraging. Do you know who you are? Do you know who you could be? Can I help you? And normally, particularly locally, I never give anyone my contact card, because locally everyone knows who I am. But for some reason, it must have been the Holy Spirit. When we finished this little conversation, I gave him my contact card. I never expected to hear from him. But then 2 or 3 weeks later, he phoned and said, "This is where I've been. This is where I was when we met. And this is what's happened since. And you've got me out of my prison." And that was just one little conversation of interest and care for him. I don't think we prayed together or anything like that. But, caring for people and bringing out the best, that is a leadership skill.
Wow, that's good. Really good, Gerald. What's the name of that book that you wrote on, not on pornography, but what's the book title?
Yes, it is about pornography. It's called Sexual Healing.
Okay.
And I wrote it with Nathan Ferreira. And Nathan and I met on Facebook, and then I invited him to come and stay. He's from Scotland, actually, and I invited him to come and stay, and he came, and he was unbelievably polite. I just couldn't break through the politeness, but that's fine. And then he joined me for the annual Pioneer Leaders Conference. And as we got to the end of that, with several hundred leaders from around the UK and beyond, and I sat him down. We were in like the coffee shop of the place we were in, the coffee bar. And I said, "Look, I need a personal assistant. And I would like it to be you, if you would consider that." And, we're in a public place. And he just broke down and wept and wept and wept. It was very, very deep. And I thought, wow, I've just asked you to work for me, and now you're crying. And he said, "Oh, you wouldn't want to hire me. And you don't know about my personal life." He's a good-looking guy, great sense of humor. And I said, "Well, talk to me." And he'd been a 4-year porn addict. I mean, it really was an addiction. And I said, then there's even more reason why you should come and work with me. And so he did, and his father brought him down, and he was with me for 4 years. And he's now in Nashville, married, and married an American girl. And so we decided, one day I came into the office and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, why do you ask?" He said, "Well, you look a bit down and depressed." I said, "Well, you know, now I'm more localized. Before that, I was all around the country, all around the world, but now I'm more localized. Guys can find me. They know I'm here." And I had no idea how deep the whole issue of pornography is, particularly for young single guys, but it's for married guys as well. And so he said, "Well, why don't we write a book together?" And so it's called Sexual Healing. And the first chapter, which I think is the best chapter, is Nathan's story. Very well written, of how he's come out of this place of secrecy and darkness and dishonesty and covering up and so on. And then I also wrote a chapter, I did more than one chapter, but I also wrote a chapter on homosexuality, same-sex attraction, which again is something that Christian men in particular just don't feel they can talk about at all. And I nearly took it out because it didn't quite fit in with the theme of the book. But then, of course, I discovered that a lot of guys can't make their same-sex attraction known, so they turn to pornography. So we were back to that again. And I think that's the second best chapter in the book. And you can get it on Amazon. You should be able to get it in Christian bookshops, but I know Christian bookshops that are embarrassed to sell it, to be honest, which is all the denial and cover-up of the whole thing. And then I refer to issues of leadership and prophetics in a book Ralph Turner wrote, which is simply called Gerald Coates' Pioneer. And as I've said, he's a brilliant writer. I wish I could write like him. And that's available too. And if for any reason folk can't get a hold of the book, you've only got to find me on Facebook, and we'll have one sent to you.
That's so good. So really what you're saying is your leadership influence has been writing these books has been a huge influence for you. Yes. And a gentleman who asked you, you had that conversation, you told him about your book that you'd co-written with Nathan. And as a result, he discovered incredible freedom from porn addiction and whatever was going on in his life. Yeah. So that is absolutely huge, Gerald. I think it's one of the big issues today is that in the church, we really do struggle to talk about and address these things, and just go at it head on. So thank you for being so bold and so courageous and just, taking this thing head on and writing a book about it. And is that book available on Amazon or on other websites? How would you get hold of the book, Gerald?
Yes, well, one book is written about me by Ralph Turner. That's called Gerald Coates' Pioneer. That should be in Christian bookshops, or they should at least be able to get it for you. Or you can just get it from Amazon. And I know loads have gone on Amazon. Okay. And then the second book is called Sexual Healing with Gerald Coates and Nathan. And that's just been such a help to guys because they don't know where to turn to. And but as I say, if through Christian bookshops or Amazon you've got problems, find me on Facebook. We'll make an arrangement together.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for talking, Gerald. This has been huge on the whole thing of leadership and development. I've got one final question for you, if that's okay. The question I've got, somebody once said a quote that there's problems to solve. So not everything's a problem. There are problems to solve, but there's tensions to manage. And in leadership, there can often be a tension. And if I can ask you, what's been your hardest tension to manage in leadership, in leading a church or leading a movement or writing books? How would you say you've managed tension over your decades as a seasoned man of God?
I think it is the grace of God.
Okay.
I think for a lot of leaders, the biggest issue is disappointment. People that you felt would be with you for a long time move on or move away, or even give up their faith. And you can get very discouraged when you've poured your heart and care into them on and off over decades, and so on. But I have to remember that my best friend is Jesus Christ, and he's never let me down. And others may, and they will have to answer for it. I've just got to answer for myself. And I'm encouraged with God's grace and his forgiveness and his belief in someone like me, because most of us are far more awful than people can imagine in our private lives. And so God's grace and God's kindness, and the fact that he's chosen us, I mean, that's just incredible. All the people that God can choose, he chooses someone like me. And so that's where we are there.
Gerald, that's a great answer. Thank you so much. And Gerald, I'm just aware that you've talked about the whole thing of leadership, mentorship, human sexuality, pornography, breaking these chains, getting out of these habits. And there's people probably watching this today thinking, how can this be? How can I get out of this? So is there any advice or help you could give to people watching this, Gerald?
Very few people can get out of those sort of things on their own. They don't need hours and hours of counsel. They just need to be able to talk to someone they trust. And the reason I often say, find me on Facebook, I'll let you have my phone number later on, and we can talk on the phone. I hardly ever phone anybody. I just let them phone me or make an arrangement to talk together on Facebook or on the phone. So the initiative is mainly with them. There are a few who I feel a sort of connection with. I've never met them. I probably won't meet them. But I in my last few years, I want to help them to be as influential for the kingdom and for the king as possible.
That's good. That's a very generous offer, Gerald. So they can find you on Facebook just as Gerald Coates. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Gerald, it's been absolutely fantastic speaking to you today. It's been a privilege to just hear your heart, and honor and hats off, respect to you for being faithful in the faith, being faithful in your leadership, and just being faithful to what the Word of God says, just about encouraging people, blessing people, and helping people. So salute you, sir, and all the best. Take care.
Thank you very much, Gordon. God bless you.
Thank you.